Why, hello there, and welcome back to another episode of Xena, Warrior Princess. No, it's just going to be economics and statistics. All right, so we started the year by looking at indifference curves and consumer preferences, and that led to demand curves. And then in the last unit we did, we looked at ISO cost lines and ISO quant lines, and that led to marginal cost and supply curves on the supplier side. And now we are going to put together the consumer side of the market with the producer side of the market and look and see how different changes affect the market price and the market quantity. So far this year, in problems we've been doing, it's just said things like, okay, assume the market price changes from $15 to $30 or whatever. So what we're going to be looking at now is how is the market price determined, and how can different changes on the consumer and producer side affect that. This is the first time we've looked at a problem that has both a demand curve and a supply curve in it. In the problem, we are given a supply curve. That's the first one. And that is the red line in the graph. So the supply curve slopes upwards. As price gets higher, suppliers want to produce more. And then the demand curve is given by this equation here. That's a downward sloping line. As price goes up, consumers will demand less. So in this diagram, the market equilibrium is already labeled. Here at point A, the price is $16. The equilibrium market price is $16. And the equilibrium market quantity is 28 units. So first, let's look and see where these numbers came from. So when you are given both the supply function and the demand function, the way you solve for the market price is you just set them equal to each other. At this equilibrium point A, the amount that consumers want, the quantity that consumers are demanding, is equal to the amount that suppliers want to supply. So that's the key about equilibrium, is that the quantity that consumers want is the exact same as the quantity that suppliers want to produce. So that means that when we're at equilibrium, the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied are equal. So we just want to set these two equations equal to each other and solve from there. So 2.86p minus 17.7 equals negative 1.43p plus 50.86. Okay, so I'm gonna bring the p's over to the left hand side. So 2.86 plus 1.43, 4.29p is equal to 50.86 plus 17.7, 68.56. Divide both sides by 4.29. And you get that p is equal to 15.98. It's not exactly 16 because of rounding that I did when I wrote the equations. And then to figure out what the market quantity is at that point, you can plug that number back into either one of the two equations. Remember, they should give you the same quantity. That's a good way to check to see if your answer's right. And if you plug them back, if you plug 15.98 into one of these equations, you get that the market quantity is 28 units. Okay, so why is it that economists believe that markets arrive at this equilibrium? So just to give you the story about how this works, we're going to imagine two alternate scenarios. So now we're down here. Let's imagine that if for some reason producers were supplying 18 units. So they're right here. I think 5, 10, 15. Oh, so anyway, they're over on this side. So if this was the quantity that producers were putting out there, what would happen is that they would be producing down here. Their cost, so remember the supply curve also represents marginal cost. So their cost would be way down here. So this is like what are the increments? 5, 10, 15, 20. So this is like maybe $12. So it's costing like $12 per unit. Because there are so few items on the market, consumers are willing to pay like $25 per unit that's out there. So producers would look out in the world, they'd be like, oh wow, it only costs us $12 to make this and we're making $25 every time we sell this. We should produce more of these because there's more profit to be had. So if producers are producing less, if it's costing them less to produce a good than people are willing to pay, they're going to want to expand output. So they're going to want to move this way. And of course, as they move this way, because there are more and more the good they're producing is becoming more and more available, people's value of it will become less and less, and it will push towards point A. So if there's a shortage of goods at then forces on both sides of the market will tend to encourage producers to produce more, which will then lower the market price, which shrinks the amount of profit they're making, and that continues until they get to point A. When they're right here at point A, the producers no longer look out into, like, there's no more profit to be made. The producers look out into the world. Consumers are valuing the good they're making at exactly the price they're currently making. There's no more profit to be had by expanding, so they're going to stay at A. Similar story, let's imagine if somehow firms were producing a quantity of 50, so we're like over here. So if we started over here, firms would be the cost that firms would be incurring to produce would be huge. It'd be like $24. And because there's so many of this good out on the market, consumers would barely value it at all. So if there were like 50 of these units sitting around, they're everywhere. They're super easy to get. So consumers only value the 50th good. It looks like at maybe $2. So that's not stable because producers would be taking a huge loss. So obviously you're going to look out into the world and be like, oh God, we made too many of these things. Nobody wants to buy them. We're trying to charge $24 because that's how much it costs us to make it, but nobody's willing to buy at $24. So producers would then want to shrink the amount that they were producing, which would then make the good more scarce, and consumers would value it more. And they would contract their supply more and more until they get to, you guessed it, point A. So then once they get at point A, the amount it costs them per unit is $16. The value that the consumers are placing on the good is $16. So there is no more improvement to be made. So that is why economists believe that markets arrive at this equilibrium, even without like direct coordination. It's not like the consumers are calling up the producers and being like, okay, this is how much I want you to charge, this is how much I value it. It's just about, reading from the market whether you're selling everything you have, if it appears that people are more willing to purchase your good, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So, next. Okay. So now let's look at let's calculate consumer surplus and producer surplus. So if you think back to when we were doing demand, consumer surplus, so the value that buyers have, is the area underneath the demand curve but above the price. So consumer surplus is this triangle right here. All right. So the market price was $16. We know from looking at the demand function that this y-intercept is 50.86. The market quantity was 28. So the area of that triangle is 1/2 times 28 times, and then 50.86 minus 16 is 34.86. So 1/2 times 28 times 34.86 is $488.04. So consumer surplus is $488.04. Producer surplus, as you will recall from the unit we just finished, is the triangle that's above the cost function, or above the cost line, the marginal cost line, aka the supply curve here, but below the price. Right? So looking at the supply function, we want to figure out when quantity is 0, what is the price. So all right, we're gonna have to fix some stuff. Okay, okay. So you move 17.7 over here. It was 2.86. P. Divide both sides by 2.86. You get that the intercept price is 6.19. So this is at 6.19. So then producer surplus is 1/2 times 28 times 16 minus 6.19. $9.81. And when you multiply those together, you get a producer surplus of 137.36. Okay, so I did not compute consumer surplus correctly because this intercept is not 50.86. You can't read the intercept on the price axis from the equation because the axes are reversed. So we need to do something similar. Here we need to set quantity demanded equal to 0 and then solve for P. So we want to know what price causes quantity to be equal to 0. So along the vertical axis, quantity is 0. So if you move the 50.86 over to the left-hand side and then divide by 1.43, you get that the intercept price there is 35.57. So this should be 35.57. And so then when you go back and you compute consumer surplus, you get 1/2 times 28 times 35.57. 35.57. You get consumer surplus is 497.98. All right. Okay. So the procedure to compute consumer surplus and producer surplus is the same as before. You're just calculating the area of a triangle. You just need to make sure that when you're looking at the equations, you don't make the mistake I did. You need to figure out the intercepts on the vertical axis by setting the quantity equal to 0 if they're not marked on the graph. All right. Okay, so this is a pretty typical problem here. We start with a given equilibrium. We're only going to be able to do a little bit of this problem, and then I'll start on the next video. We want to compute what happens to consumer surplus and producer surplus if consumer incomes drop. And actually, I'm just going to start this problem on the next video. So I'll see you in just a couple seconds.